Wonderful. And I'd like to give a big thank you to our panelists here for taking the time out of their day, taking the time out of their weekend to join us. So if we can just kick it off to you guys. I know that you're not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from our amazing entrepreneurial panelists here. So why don't we start off with Dr. Kulak, and we can have each of you introduce yourselves. Please include your YU major and grad year, because I know we're all sprinkled a little bit, and give a snapshot of your company and your organization for us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shuli. I graduated from Stern in 06. I think that makes me old in this crowd, but I majored in bio and I minored in business. And then I graduated Einstein with a distinction in research in 2012, and then received an MBA from SciSins in 2016. I now head corporate strategy and business development for a new biotech company based in Boston. The company focuses on developing advanced therapeutics for children with genetic diseases. That's me in a nutshell.
Really, Ed? Are you a little frozen there? Okay, let's, how about Nathaniel? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little snapshot?
Absolutely. Pleasure meeting everyone. I'm a 2002 grad from the SciSims program. Was an accounting and finance major, and then basically started out my career working in audit for Ernst & Young, focused on venture capital and private equity clients. Did that for a few years, realized that what my clients were doing was a lot more interesting to me than what I was doing, and slowly set off a transition into investing. I worked in corp dev at IDT for a couple of years, then went back to get my MBA. Was a 2010 grad from MIT's Sloan's MBA program. And then basically set off a path towards entrepreneurship and venture capital. I started a venture capital firm called TechQ Ventures. We were initially investing in technology spin-outs from universities. Today we're heavily focused on deep technology, investments, and I guess now we're managing about $50 million. So that's pleasure meeting everyone.
Much, Daniel. Daniel, if you could introduce yourself, give a little snapshot of what you do, your company.
Hi, everyone. I'm for sure the least accomplished on this call, and probably the youngest. I graduated back in 2019, so pretty recently. I majored in accounting and then did smicha for a year or two. I started off at Deloitte in their financial services audit practice, and then I recently pivoted into the world of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and launched a cryptocurrency hedge fund with my partner of mine. And we kind of, I don't know how familiar people here are with kind of the cryptocurrency landscape, but we kind of invest across the spectrum, different areas, DeFi, GameFi, some NFT projects, a few IPOs, etc. So kind of changes obviously as every day is different and exciting, but that's what we're up to right now.
Thank you, Daniel. And last but not least, Ed, if you could introduce yourself and give us a snapshot about what you do.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Stelzer. I know it's Sunday morning. It's early. People still have their bed heads on. But if you're able to, if you don't mind putting on the screen, it's always nicer for us to be able to see who we're talking to. So I appreciate Yair and Ellie being on the screen already. And if anyone else wants to come on, that would be amazing. And I am a 1990 Yeshiva College graduate. I graduated, I studied political science, and my path was I was heading to law school when I was in college. And I became a lawyer, and I worked at New York City, a big law firm, big law firm. And then when the first kind of internet boom hit, I joined a startup to head up business development in the very, very early days of, we called it back then, we called it the wireless space. Nowadays, it's just a device that's in our pocket. And my path was not linear at all. And that's one of the themes I think that might be useful as everyone here on this call is thinking about your futures. But after practicing law, after heading biz dev at a startup, I went back to practicing law when it was post 9/11, so things changed. The landscape changed quite a bit. But I was practicing law then at a large insurance company in a global role based in Switzerland, and ultimately that draw to come back to the kind of the entrepreneurial landscape always kind of called me back, and also just to approach things with a business mindset. Lawyers tend to fix things when they're broken, and entrepreneurs tend to build things so that they can break. And that was the perspective that I had. And so now I work as my fancy pants title is entrepreneur in residence at a venture fund in New York City, where I take the background that I have in the legal and regulatory work that I've done, in the insurance work that I've done, to build startups in the startups in regulated industries. And I'm happy to talk about that more. But great to meet everyone, see everyone, and look forward to an exciting conversation.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. It's really, the whole idea of entrepreneurship is just so exciting because it really does know no major, right? We have such a vast group of panelists here, all with completely different experiences, completely different majors. And it really just goes to show you that if you have the drive, if you have the passion, if you have the mindset, you yourself can become an entrepreneur. With that said, why don't we take it back a little bit to when you were in school, or just graduated? What was your first job from when you graduated YU? And do you view this as a starting point to where you are today? Let's work backwards here a little bit. Let's start with Ed.
Sure. So you guys get to hear from me twice without a gap. Lucky you all. So just to continue on what I was saying before, my first job was my first job was clerking for a justice on the New Jersey Supreme Court. I don't know if there are any lawyers or hopeful lawyers in this group, but I clerked for a year after graduating NYU Law School, which I went to straight after my YU experience. And then I went to work at a big law firm. And the practicing as a lawyer taught me a lot of things. I mean, I know we'll probably come to what entrepreneurship means to all of us, and I'm sure everyone here has a different perspective on it. But coming at it from a practicing lawyer, what I got to see in my very first job was how very large corporations work, how they operate, how they think. The matters that I were working on were, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And for me, who had a checking account at the time that probably had about $360 in it, that was an incomprehensible sum of money that there would be that much at stake in the things that I was working on. I was working actually as a litigator, so the very, very high stakes issues. But what I learned from those early years of legal practice was how to think about risk, how to think about decision-making, particularly in a high stakes, large Fortune 500 kind of context. Those decisions are important. And when you think about entrepreneurship, typically you think about entrepreneurship in being sort of the small startup companies, but think about Google, think about Facebook, think about Amazon. Those were startups once. And those startups, hopefully become very, very large companies, perhaps very quickly, perhaps over a course of a period of time. But the thought process, I think, is always the same, right? You want to be thinking about the same fundamentals. And so that was very helpful for me in that first job. I'm not suggesting that anybody should become a lawyer or that is necessarily the ideal path for pursuing an entrepreneurial lifestyle or a life path, but it was the path that I was on, and that led me through various twists and turns to the work that I'm doing today, which is, you know, building companies that's kind of have the strands of the early parts of my, you know, of my career.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Ed. Let's go to Daniel. Why don't you tell us a bit about what your first job was when you graduated from YU, and if you view this as a starting point to where you are today? Daniel, you're muted.
There we go. Perfect.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. I graduated YU and I went to Deloitte to their audit practice. I was kind of focused on financial services, some emerging growth companies. You know, I kind of decided to go to Deloitte. I figured I wanted a background in financial statements to kind of learn how businesses work from the ground up, get my CPA, etc. And I would say it pushed me towards entrepreneurship just by seeing what I don't want to do, and then maybe pushing me in almost the completely opposite direction. I think it was really, I learned a ton there, and it really was an amazing experience, an amazing learning, I guess, learning ground, etc. For me, it was just hard because I kind of would come from YU, where I felt like I was kind of pursuing things that I was enjoying every day, learning things that were exciting to me. And then you'd go to Deloitte, and you don't really have, in a traditional job like that, you don't necessarily have control of what the project you're doing, what you're working on, how you're filling your time during the day. And I kind of would be sitting there talking to friends what they're doing, and there would be all these things that were interesting for me. And I just didn't have the hours in my day to kind of pursue the things that were interested to me. So I kind of felt like I'd stick my time out there. It's very important, obviously, especially at the beginning. I felt get that experience, and that at least a little bit of corporate experience, to get a little bit of accolades, to learn how businesses run, to learn how to communicate, how to even just be in a business environment. So I think that was for sure irreplaceable and super valuable. The work ethic it requires to go through busy seasons, to study for the CPAs, to kind of balance all that, I think is very, very important. To kind of polish yourself and to learn a little bit how things work. But then I think it kind of pushed me almost in the opposite direction, where I was like, you're auditing companies right now like a lawyer, but you're auditing some of these startups and these emerging growth companies. You're saying, wow, this is so cool. Like, that's an awesome concept. I would love to be working on that, as opposed to auditing their balance sheets. So then I kind of decided I had a kid, had a son, took some paternity leave, and kind of during that time, I spent a lot of time pursuing different avenues, different opportunities, and then kind of came back and said, I don't think this is for me anymore, and pivoted. So I guess the answer is yes, but maybe in the opposite direction as others.
And it's so valuable. It's extremely valuable when you know, you start thinking about what you want to do, and then you realize, oh, this is not what I want to do at all. So having each of these experiences, you know, leading you down different paths, nothing is linear. It's not one linear path. It's more like different branches. So you kind of exhibited that there, and that's very, very characteristic of that entrepreneurial spirit that we're trying to get here. Nathaniel, why don't you tell us about your first job from when you graduated YU, and do you view this as your starting point to where you are today?
Yeah, very interestingly, I graduated from YU. I didn't really have a strong sense of what I wanted to be doing long term. I thought that getting an accounting degree and starting out as a CPA would be a good sort of entry point to business. And so, you know, started out, I was at Ernst & Young, did audit for about 3.5 years, and was actually very fortunate to be placed on, you know, private equity and venture capital clients early on. Realized that what they were doing, what my clients were doing, was a lot more interesting to me than working in the accounting field. And the reasoning is I think that I find myself to be a much more creative and out of the box type of person. I felt that accounting was very regimented and very structural, and that did not fit my personality very well. And you know, at the same time, while I did want to transition into venture capital and private equity, I realized that moving from back office functional roles into front office roles was actually pretty impossible. And so unless I wanted to go work in a controller type of capacity for a venture capital or private equity fund, there was really no way to break in directly. And so one of the things I kind of set out to do was figure out a set of processes or different transitions that I would have to make over the years in order to get to my my target field, which was the venture capital field. And so the initial job that I had was actually a great introduction, an overview of the field. But it also allowed me to realize that I have to take another few set of steps in order to get there. That included changing jobs to a corp dev M&A type of role at a tech holding company. That included getting an MBA and learning a lot about entrepreneurship and venture capital and developing relationships with the tech and startup community. And then, going out and developing skills for fundraising, for connecting with investors, and basically starting out my own firm. So I thought it was I guess my first job was a great introduction, but there were a series of steps that I had to take in order to get to where I was today.
Well, thank you so much, Nathaniel. Very similar, almost very similar experience to Daniel's, right? You both kind of started in accounting. You started, working with those accounts of the area where you want to be and say, that's actually where I want to go. So it's very interesting. Shuli, if you could take over from here, let us know what your first job after you graduated was, and if you view that as a starting point.
Yeah, I guess it depends which time you mean when I graduated.
3 times.
Way too many degrees. My husband, actually, we were at an event. He went up to Richard Joel and he was like, do not let her enroll in another school. She's done. She has to get a job. No more YU. So after I graduated from Stern, I actually was really at a loss for how to get a job and what I wanted to do. I just really didn't have exposure to the space that I was interested in. I knew I really like science and I really like business, and I just didn't really know how people get jobs or what they do. So I actually kind of went with the flow a little bit, and a job fell on my lap at Einstein. And that sort of set the path for the rest of my professional career. I worked at Einstein and then realized, that wasn't where I wanted to be. Similar theme to everybody else. I was reviewing grants for research projects. And so I decided I needed an advanced degree, and I was already living at Einstein. So I was like, okay, I'll go to medical school. And the people that I saw working in the biotech pharma space, venture biopharma, which is what I do now, were all people that had MDs or PhDs and had these kind of clinical careers or labs for a decade and then transitioned into industry. So I was like, okay, I guess I got to do that. And I went to Einstein, and I graduated with a distinction in research, and then went on to residency like everybody else in the class did. And then I got to residency and I was like, oh my God, I hate this. I cannot do this for another 10 years to get the job that I eventually want. And so while I was in residency, I did an MBA at SciSims, and I basically took call every Shabbat so that I could do the MBA on Sundays and evenings. And then I got connected with someone serendipitously that put me in touch with someone who was looking to hire at a biotech venture fund. And so that kind of melded the MBA and the MD. And so I'll just take a step back for a second and explain a little bit of what I've done at my various jobs. Essentially, It's my job to grow the pipeline of an existing biotech or pharmaceutical company, and so it's kind of knowing what's exciting scientifically, knowing about the company and thinking of the corporate strategy, and then finding that science, putting the deal terms together, deciding, you know, the science is good, it's a good business decision, let's bring it into the company, or in the context of a venture capital company, let's invest in a smaller existing company, or let's take this interesting new piece of science and create a new company around it, take the money from the venture fund and start a new company. So it's always like the same kind of work. It's like the science is good science, it meets an unmet medical need, and someone can make money. If they develop the science into hopefully a product for patients that they'll use, it's just in the context of a company that already exists, or in the context of creating a new company around that piece of science. So every little kind of, all the jobs that I had or the education that I had really kind of set me up for that eventual set of jobs that I wanted. But it wasn't a clear, direct path like everyone else was describing that was true for them as well.
Hey, Barbara, could we maybe go a little bit off script here? We're a small enough group. I'm super curious. I'm super curious about everyone sitting in the audience, you know, why they're here, what they're interested in finding out about, and whether or not they want to be brave enough to go off mic or just put something in the chat. Because, you know, our objective here as panelists is to help you as, we're assuming everyone here are students. You know, what is it that you want to hear about? What are you most interested in entrepreneurship? I mean, what are the questions that you have? I know we're going to have a Q&A period, but maybe if someone just wants to kind of start that either in the chat or in the or speaking up, we can maybe cater our comments that might be more helpful for what you all are looking for. Don't shoot me, Barbara.
No, this is a great idea. This is the kind of stuff I love. I love creating situations for more engagement. You see these questions? They can go out the window right now. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, I really like the idea of networking and sort of growing your network. I'm very interested in venture capital to that end. And I was wondering, I also like the idea of being an entrepreneur and owning your own company. And I was wondering how networking plays a role in that. And I'm sure it plays a very big role. And maybe either some tips on how to grow your network or what kind of a role it plays in entrepreneurship.
All right, so since I'm the one who opened up my mouth,
I was going to ask who is that directed towards, or if it's all.
One of the things that I think we'll probably get to is words of advice that, you know, we may have for, you know, for everyone here in the panel, or for everyone here in the group. And that's why I was somewhat asking my question, which is what are people interested in hearing about? And I think the word, Ellie, I'm not sure, I hope I'm pronouncing it Ellie or Eli, you know, your question is a good one, because one of the things that I would say to any aspiring student or any aspiring entrepreneur is that it's a team sport. And I'm the last person to make, sports metaphors and sports references, but it's any kind of entrepreneurship, unless even a lemonade stand that my kids might have, you know, downstairs, it's really difficult to do it by yourself. And so people say the word networking, and it becomes almost a dirty word, like I have to go out to meet people and talk to people, and someone might be, you know, an introvert, and that may be the last thing that they ever want to even think about. But I got to say, you know, if everyone here is a student and you're in college, your networking starts right now. Your networking starts with the people that you're sitting next to in class, your professors, the people that you're meeting, you know, in places like this. I know, you know, everyone has Zoom fatigue and everyone's kind of tired of it, but there are opportunities to meet people. And since it is a team sport, you never know, you know, the person may be your future partner, your future COO, your future CTO, for whatever it is that your amazing idea is. So I wouldn't think of the word networking as too loaded a term as I have to go out and meet all these people in all these places. Networking starts in your first circle, and happy to talk about that more. But that, I would say, is, you know, that's where it should start. It should start in your community where you live. It should start in your school. and it'll branch out from that just naturally. Is that's how I always perceive it. But any kind of business endeavor, especially entrepreneurship, it's always a team sport, whether it's investors, whether it's people who work with you, people who work for you. Those are that's where your networking should begin.
Thank you.
We have a hand up from one of the students, Rebecca Schlossberg.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. So I definitely agree with the networking thing, and I like that advice. And I have a question more directed to Shuli. So I really love hearing about
those are that's where your networking should begin.
and I really enjoyed hearing how you got to biotech. I have my undergrad. I graduated from undergrad and I was in neuroscience and psychology with a concentration in bio. Now I'm actually in the YU Master's Entrepreneurship biotech program. And I guess my question is, I'm starting to look for jobs now, and I noticed that a lot of people have MDs or MBAs. And I was just wondering, how important do you think that is? Coming from like my point of view right now, I'm getting my master's. Do you think I would have to continue on in schooling, or do you think it's possible to enter the field with this master's?
You know, it's a really good question. I actually helped start that program, so I'm happy to see someone in it. Because, you know, I really wanted to do this work, and I was like, oh my God, going to medical school and residency is really overkill for a lot of the jobs. And I'll be honest, what it does for sure, and is it opens a door. People say, oh, you're a doctor and you have an MBA. You must know everything about medicine and how to, you know, do financial modeling with your eyes closed, even if you don't. And you, and so it definitely does something for you. I'm not gonna pretend that it's worthless, but a lot of people in the space don't have MDs, don't have PhDs. I would say the two ways, and it depends at what kind of work you want to do in the biotech pharma kind of space, and what your aspiration is for kind of, if you want a C-suite job or not. A lot of people come into it, but you have to pay your dues in one way or another, is what I say. So like, in a way, I got to skip the line to a job because I spent my time in medical school and in residency. What a lot of other people do is they spend their time as an analyst or like at a bank. And that's kind of like residency, right? You work 90 hours a week and you learn by doing. And that's a great way to get into the industry too, at kind of like an entry level. And other people also do consulting. So they work for a McKinsey or a BCG, and that's a real kind of entryway into the type of work that I do too. I happen to have had 2 kids by the time I was done with residency, and I was like, I'm not, and it wasn't COVID yet, so I wasn't going to travel 4 days a week. It just wasn't for me. And I had already done residency. I wasn't going to work 90 hours a week at a bank and slave away for someone else. So those were not paths that make sense to me, but they make a lot of sense in general if you're kind of starting from scratch and you don't have to pay a lot of tuition. You get paid.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have one question that was sent to me via the chat. This is a very interesting question. Is the strategy and entrepreneurship major going to help in the real world, or is it all experience? And this can be, I muted myself. Let's hear from someone who we haven't heard from yet regarding the student questions. Maybe Nathaniel, if you'd be able to answer that question, your opinion. It's very.
Could you just repeat the question? I missed some of it.
No, of course. So we have a strategy and entrepreneurship major. The student is asking, is the strategy and entrepreneurship major going to help in the real world, or is it all based on experience? That's for this area.
One thing I would add, I graduated YU in 2002, and I don't even think there was an entrepreneurship sort of focus back then. I did my MBA at MIT, and they've actually developed an entire curriculum in the MBA program structured around entrepreneurship, and their theory and thesis is that entrepreneurship is something that can be taught. You know, some of my favorite courses in the MBA program revolved around actual entrepreneurship, starting companies, writing business plans. I was actually, as an MBA student, a winner of MIT's business plan competition. It's called the MIT 100K. And I think actual education as it comes to entrepreneurship is very helpful. But it's not sort of the be all and end all. It kind of just gives you the tools and knowledge that can serve as a starting point. And I guess what you do with that is really up to you. I think we had a great question at the beginning regarding networking. I think networking is something that you can learn, but it also is a very fundamental aspect as it comes to entrepreneurship itself. And a lot of times things like that cannot be taught in the classroom. They're more experiential. You know, and so I think to answer that question, I've kind of gone through a long rant, but entrepreneurship is something that where the key sort of fundamental aspects of it can be taught, but what you do with it is really up to you. You know, would I recommend people taking courses in strategy and entrepreneurship? Absolutely, if that's what you want to do. You know, I think it helps.
I'll
Well said.
piggyback on something that Nathaniel said that I think was really important as I was kind of learning. I think that networking is so important. Almost all my jobs came from someone who had an opening in their job, and they knew me from a person who knew another person. They, you know, had a coffee and thought I had the right background. What you can learn and what's really important and is sometimes missing from people is learning networking etiquette. And so, you know, what's an appropriate amount of time to take from a professional? What kind of questions do you approach them with? What's the expectation for, you know, the information that they're going to give you, and the way that you're meant to draw out the information from them? I think, especially in YU, everybody wants to help and is willing to help, but there's kind of an EQ that you can learn a little bit, and an etiquette around people's time and how you approach them with, everybody knows everybody wants a job eventually, but kind of a graceful way of doing it.
Brava, and that's a super important point. And if that EQ doesn't come naturally, here's a clue that everyone should just write this one down. Whenever you meet with someone that you just met or don't know, before you leave that conversation, whether it's on a phone, Zoom, or in person, ask them the following question: is there anything I can do for you? Because all of a sudden what that question has done is turned it around from I am a seeker, I'm asking for something, as opposed to maybe I can help you. Now you all may be saying, what can I do to help, you know, the person I'm speaking to? But, you know, you never ever know. And at a minimum, it shows that you're also thinking about, you know, trying to be giving as well as, you know, seeking advice and assistance. That one has served me inordinately well many, many times.
We have any other questions from students as of yet? Oh, I think I saw a hand. Did I see a hand up? Yes,
Yeah.
Yair?
How do you guys balance your like daily life activities with all your like your family and other stuff with all your like busy schedules and everything you guys do.
Yeah, and if I could just piggyback on that as well, just maybe expand it a little bit, I'm sorry. But like I've heard from lots of VCs and other people that they're very interested in founders who are sort of all in on their company and just doing everything they possibly can for the company itself. So like if that's your mindset, then how does that work-life balance really play out? But sorry.
So much to say on this, but Daniel, I'm sure you're closest to graduation. So
Yeah,
I'm sure
I'm honestly interested in that question also. I'd love to hear from some more student entrepreneurs myself. But also a couple things, I actually work-life balance for me, I went to yeshiva, I came back and everything was about the golden medium and trying work-life balance. And I was kind of, work-life balance becomes trickier and trickier the more things that are on the life side, because work is work and work gets busier and less busy, but life, you have your social life, your family life, your religious life, whatever is kind of in that bucket, and it's tough. And I was speaking to Michael Eisenberg, I don't know, from all of you seen Israel a little bit, and he actually said this also on a TED Talk, but his point was basically that at the beginning there really is no such thing as work-life balance, and it's kind of a hard reality to face and to stomach, but there are certain things that probably are non-negotiable, whatever that's going to be for you, and you have to figure out what you need for your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. But to think that you're going to be able to build something and put your heart and soul into something without sacrificing other things is impossible, because there are only 24 hours in the day, and ultimately something's going to have to give. So whether if part of your work-life balance traditionally is you go to the gym every day or you learn every day, so you're going to have to probably figure out a way to either exercise more efficiently or less frequently, or to learn something a little bit differently. And I think for me, for sure, I'm sure as with entrepreneurship in general, with business, there's different phases. You're building aggressively, you're maybe a little bit more relaxed, or busier times, less busy times. And I think you could probably reshuffle the deck on what it means to have a work-life balance. But at least for me personally, it's tough, and it's definitely a struggle to figure out what exactly that balance is that you need, because everybody needs a balance. But I think what work-life balance probably means as a student or as an employee changes what work-life balance means as an entrepreneur when you kind of are putting a lot into a business. So I guess that's my 2 cents, that you kind of have to, for me, it's been trial and error over the past, I'd say, few months of just trying this and realizing that this is not so balanced, and maybe having to cut back on this, add this, etc. But the answer is that something's going to for sure have to give. So it's just kind of figuring out what that balance means, in my opinion. But I'd love to hear from the professionals.
I agree with that. The work-life balance. When I started working as a lawyer, I met my now wife, and I say it's a miracle because I was working 24/6. And so maybe the answer to work-life balance is Shabbos, right? But there are times when, as Daniel was just saying, there are times when you just have to crank it out, grind it out. You just have to, if you have to, be up until 1, 2, 3 in the morning because you're launching something, or because you have a deadline, or because whatever it is. And then there are times when, you can pull back and you can find time to.
There's no parking on this floor? I thought there was parking down here too. I'm trying.
Love it when that happens. There never is a perfect answer to that question, and it does go in phases. The only other thing I can say is that when you're younger when you're earlier in your career, let me put it that way, and perhaps your commitments are less, have less wings to them, spouse or significant other or children or family, you have more flexibility in terms of being able to kind of dedicate that time. And so, Ellie, to your sort of tag on to the question, yeah, you have to work hard, right? I mean, that's what we do, right? We work hard, we do our best, and then there are times, you work hard, and when you play hard, and no one in this entire universe is going to have the perfect answer for you that's going to give you the right thing, but there is an expectation, I think, from your future investors or your current investors, that you're going to be all in when you need to be all in. It's not the answer he wanted to hear.
No, it was actually very helpful. I appreciate that.
I'll give the mom perspective. you're going to always feel like you're failing. Everyone I know, regardless of what they're doing professionally, feels like they're not doing enough. They don't have enough time. I'm so busy. You know, even people, you're like, you have a nanny, 3 cleaning people, and no job. I'm not sure why you're so stressed out. The point is, everybody's so busy, and we all, if there's a vacuum in this day and age of time and space, it gets filled. There's no like, yeah, I'm like eating bonbons on the couch today. So you may as well fill your professional time with what you really love and enjoy doing. You spend more time working, even if it's really a 9-to-5 job, than you do with your kids and your family. And so if you're going to work, you should do what you love. And I think then, honestly, the time just kind of extends with that. For me, it's just, I mean, there are times where I've been a shell of a human being. And there are times where, you know, my friends that I went to medical school with have to be in the office from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if I want to be at my kids' play or whatever it is, I get to just block my calendar for 2 hours and not put in a meeting, and I can go wherever I want to go in the middle of the day. I don't have to be seeing patients or whatever it is. So it's not a balance in the sense that things are even. It's just a balance in the sense of like, somehow you're not falling over in the chaos of like keeping all the balls in the air. But if you're enjoying yourself and you, as Daniel was saying, kind of like ticked off the big boxes, like Shabbat, I wanted to have kids. I felt like I, you know, wanted to do X, Y, and Z was important to me, and the big boxes are ticked. I think that you find that you can like give your heart to your work in a way that makes you a great employee, entrepreneur, whatever it is.
I just want to add one more quick thing, if that's okay. Sorry, just very quickly. Part of the question I think was framed as like, as an entrepreneur, how do you have work-life balance? And I think maybe the starkest reality that I had kind of leaving YU is that if you're going to succeed in any field, even if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not going to really be able to have work-life balance, because whether it's medical school, investment banking, consulting, accounting, whatever it is, if you're going in with just a 9-to-5 mentality, you'll probably be fine and check the boxes, but ultimately it's probably not going to lead to enormous success. And even if you're working for somebody else, you're working in a company after hours, doing additional research, reading news articles, networking, etc., you really have to be putting a lot of time in at the beginning, I think, of any career. And the difference with entrepreneurship is that it's just your own career, you're more passionate about it, and kind of what you put in is what you get out of it. But I think regardless, you kind of have to have that work hard mentality.
One thing I would just add, you know, we're investors in early stage companies. We typically are first check writers into companies. And one of the attributes that we look for in entrepreneurs that we back is it's a sort of an obsession with solving a problem that they've basically started a company around. So if you're focused on certain type of technology or certain type of opportunity, how obsessed are you about solving that problem? And everyone who we typically back is extremely obsessed with the issue that they're working on, whether it's research that they've conducted at a university for 6 years that they're now commercializing, whether it's something that they've been working on in a corporate setting that they can think will only be addressed through a startup type of opportunity. Everyone's really obsessed, and that obsession typically leads to a complete and extreme focus on solving that problem. And that usually does not lead to a work-life balance. It's just reality. I mean, they're working on this pretty much every hour of the day, and you know, there's very few people. I mean, the folks that we've invested in who have a work-life balance, they tend to not be doing as well as the ones who don't. That's just the reality of it. And the ones who don't have a work-life balance is usually because they're really, really obsessed about solving a problem, which gives them, that obsession really gives them, in my opinion, forms a part of their unfair competitive advantage within that. So I can speak to myself, not for other folks, but starting a company takes a lot of work. I've worked many nights till 2, 3 a.m. It's never been a question for me in terms of not doing that. If something needed to get out, be ready, completed in the next morning, then I just did it. Sleep be damned. I think that's it's part of the lifestyle that you choose by being an entrepreneur. If that doesn't work for you, then maybe getting a 9-to-5 job is the answer. So you kind of have to think about how that plays in the long term of what you want and what's more important to you as an individual.
The other thing that I didn't hear people mention, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term entrepreneurship. So the idea of entrepreneurship, it actually gives me a panic attack. So I don't think I would ever be able to function if I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from, and if I didn't have health insurance. But I love building companies, thinking about corporate strategy and development, taking something like raw and new and messy, but with a lot of potential, and kind of polishing it up and making it a holistic whole story that can be packaged up for investors or executives or whatever it is. So there's definitely that kind of lore that goes around, and like an entrepreneur, that I think our culture gives a lot of props to or glorifies, but it's really hard, as Nathaniel was saying, it's dark for a lot of people, and that takes a certain personality, but you can like the idea of building businesses, but do it within the context of a larger company, and that's what entrepreneurship is, and that's probably what I do in my career more. So you kind of build a business, but in the context of the security of a bigger company, and other investors, other professionals that you can kind of draw from and grow from professionally too. So they're kind of different flavors for different people, depending on what you like and what you can tolerate.
Can I suggest, Barbara, since it looks like we've only got 5 minutes left, at least officially on the clock. One of the
It's been a really
questions,
great conversation.
one of the questions you had asked us all to think about is advice that we might give, and that's why I was asking the question for what people are interested in hearing about. But I'd be very interested to hear from the other panelists about advice they might give to students graduating, starting an thinking about an entrepreneurship path, or people who are already on that path. What thoughts or words of wisdom might you have for someone in that posture? I mean, I have a daughter in Stern now, and she's scratching her head in terms of majors and things like that. And so I'm kind of living this with her right now in terms of, thinking about a future path. But if anyone has any advice, and by the way, if anyone not on the panel has any advice, I'd love to hear it. Nathaniel, could I take the liberty of asking you for your words of advice? Start with you.
I would just share that, in general, passion plays a really important role in everything that you do. If you're going to go into entrepreneurship, if you're looking for a path, identify something that that you're really passionate about, and start out over there and use that as a drive and a focus to, propel a career and a path forward in terms of entrepreneurship. That's sort of, whenever I meet an entrepreneur for the first time, the one question I always ask them is, what led you to this point? Like, why are you trying to solve this problem? What is driving you towards, this being an area that you want to spend the next 10 to 15 years in? And if there's no direct correlation or no direct link between that answer and the person's experience, their career, what they've been doing up to this point, then there's sort of a break in that story. And so there's I think, a lot of times when you're coming out of university, and I'm sort of guilty for doing this as well, you're really focused on doing what is the right path, or what everyone else is sort of doing. So for me, coming out of YU, 70% of the graduates out of SciSims were all going into accounting, to a big 5 accounting firm, and I kind of thought that was the right path in my life. But that's not necessarily the right path for you. The right path for you is what you're passionate about. And as a 22-year-old graduate, if you could try to focus on that as opposed to what you think everyone else is telling you the right path. I mean, you have to basically look at your career as a 50, 60-year trajectory, and not in the window or context of 2 or 3 years. And when you kind of do that, I think the decisions that you make are going to be a lot different. So,
And Nathaniel, so someone here in the crowd is definitely thinking, what if I'm passionate about nothing?
Well, you know what, that's a very unique problem to have. I feel like everyone is passionate about something.
What if I'm passionate about ice cream sandwiches?
Well, if you're really, if you are passionate about ice cream sandwiches and you've found a way or thought about a methodology for making them better, making them cheaper, making them tastier, making them in a manner that no one else thought of before, well, that's your passion right there. So what I would tell most people is that this is just more sort of YU specific, is most of us kind of grew up in a very specific bubble of the schooling, education, Eretz Yisrael learning, and sort of the career path that everyone sort of thinks we need to have. There's something to like going out there to the world and trying new things and experiencing new things. That may include traveling, that may include reading, that may include trying different internships. And, I think the one thing I would recommend to people who have been living a very structured and very regimented life is to get out of your comfort zone and to try things that that may be a little bit different, maybe not something that you would have thought about doing, but that you have the luxury of doing as a 22-year-old single, unmarried person. But I think that's sort of where I would start.
everyone. So
great.
for the sake of time, I'm just gonna pose one last, it goes along with the same advice question. If you can kind of summarize your biggest piece of advice, your final advice for the students, and then we are gonna cap the panel there because this has been amazing, absolutely amazing. So why don't let's go, Daniel, your last piece, final advice for our aspiring entrepreneurs here.
All right, I guess final advice, which honestly also maybe piggybacks off the, I guess, a previous comment, is really just, I'd say, to be curious. I mean, by that question about not knowing your passion, I was definitely in that spot. If I knew my passion, I probably would have gone to Deloitte. I probably would have pursued the passion right out of college. And I think a lot of the times people don't know their passion, and you realize you don't know your passion, but you also only know like 0.0005% of the things that are even out there in the world. So the more you learn, the more you read, the more curious you are, the more you speak to people, then you'll find your passion. So I think just to be curious, to realize, I mean, if not, everything that I'm doing is only because of the network that I built, and was not even trying to build a network, just by being social, talking to people, asking them what they do. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say is just to try and learn as much as you can from other people. Ask people what they're doing, why they're doing that. I mean, we hear words all the time, M&A. I'm sure half of Sims probably doesn't even know what M&A means. And they just say M&A, whatever it is. But actually take the 10 minutes to Google something, to look into something, to really understand what people are doing. And I think that'll help guide you. You ask people, you talk to people, you ask them what they're doing, you look up what they're doing, you research a little bit. I think you'll be in a pretty good spot.
Daniel, Shuli, last snippet of advice.
Yeah, I think I'll echo what Daniel says, just consume as much as you can consume. People, conversations, reading, YouTube, Google, whatever it is. And this echoes what Nathaniel was saying. You'll just broaden yourself a little bit more and expose yourself and have a general understanding. And then also in terms of just career direction, sometimes it's not, I want to start a company. So how do I get to start a company? Sometimes it's, what are the skills that I need to be able to start a company, and think of the jobs that can give you the right experiences and tool sets. And it may not be like the linear path towards starting a company, but you're building your professional tools and collecting that personal growth to get you eventually to the job that you want.
Thank you, Julie. Ed, your last little snippet of advice for our students?
My last snippet of advice, but I don't want to call it the last. I put my email, by the way, for folks who are on, I put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out. And any questions, even stupid questions, there are no stupid questions. So please, I'd love to hear from you. And I'm sure, don't be shy. The best piece of advice I can give, in addition to all the wonderful things that have been said, is start now. Start now. We are in a Cambrian moment. If you've never heard that term, Google it, because there's a fantastic article in The Economist from a number of years back that describes the moment that we are in now, with the availability of capital, the ease of technology, the speed at which things can be accomplished. You couldn't do some of the things that are being done today, even 10 years ago, until, Amazon came up with its web services. There's so much that you can do now, and there's so much that one can do. Forget about as a college student, as a high school student. Social media just gives you the opportunity to test your ideas. You don't have to build your team now, but build your network. Think about the people who are sitting next to you. You have an idea, see it through, test it, even if it's just a concept. Build a prototype. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000,000 words. So start now or start yesterday. And even if you think it's a bad idea, by being able to put it out there, test it with the world will come back to you and tell you, is this a good idea or is it not? And you'll be able to adapt and pivot. And even though I'm going to take the liberty of a second piece of advice, make sure to call your mother at least once a week, probably Erev Shabbat. And when when you have a mother-in-law, you should be blessed to have a mother-in-law. Remember that I said this, call your mother-in-law at least once a week. Best move you'll ever make in your entire life.
Excellent advice, of course. And Nathaniel, I know you kind of shared your big piece of advice, but if you do have one last thing, otherwise we are going to close it out here.
Yeah, no, I do have one other thing. I would just, encourage everyone to learn about what I call the power of no. Being an entrepreneur and a successful one, you're going to be getting a lot of no's. Like throughout your entire career, people are going to be saying no to you all the time. And no is great for two reasons. No is, I believe, the start of a conversation. So when someone says no to you, your response really should be to find out why. And really try to see if there's something you can learn from that no to do it better the next time when you go to a different investor, when you go to a different colleague, someone you're trying to hire. You'll be able to take that feedback and incorporate it into what you're doing. So as an entrepreneur, you're going to be getting like 9 out of the 10 responses that you'll get will always be no's. How you react to that is going to be critical into your success. So you have to be comfortable hearing no and doing something with it. And that's sort of one thing I would just add. Like I got so many no's. Like it took me 9 months to get my first check from investors. And I probably got like 30 to 50 no's along that path and journey. And had I stopped at, the 15th no, I probably would not have gotten to the, 50th no, and I would not be where I am today. So just be comfortable with people saying no to you and not liking your idea. That's perfectly part of it. And the second thing is a lot of times no doesn't mean no, it just means maybe. And so you have to, as an entrepreneur, be able to discern when no is just the start of a conversation. And it's an artful skill that you'll learn over time. The really good entrepreneurs just are very comfortable around at times when they get no, and a lot of times they turn those no's into yeses. And so that's sort of what I would leave everyone with.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Big thank you to all of our amazing and successful panelists here. Yes, round of applause. Thank you, Ed. All of your information was extremely valuable, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us. And I know that our students definitely soaked it all in, gained a lot from it. And with that, I bid you all adieu. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us, and bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Everyone.